Okay, good morning. Let's have a class. We're trying to finish the lecture today and for the exams week. And the next week we don't have a lecture because October 3rd we will have a lab midterm exam, so no lecture. And October 5th is your fall break. And come back Tuesday, we'll do the review of the exam 2, and then the Thursday, the following next week Thursday, we'll do the exam 2. Okay. And the review question I will put on the eCampus. Whatever you call it, study guidelines, practice exams, I will put on the eCampus over the weekend, and you can review, have a whole week to do it. So we're going to rush up here a little bit quick. We have left the topic is sexual transmitted disease. I'll just add an acronym, which is STD. We want to mention several things. Sexual transmitted disease is actually a big public health risk in the whole world. Annually, there is more than 300 million. So 300 million cases annually in the whole world. This is a disease, 95% is from male to female. This is an epidemiology survey find that. And this sexual transmitted disease, there is no immune memory capability. So what this means, if you have a sexually transmitted disease, does not mean that you get it, does not mean you recovered, you will never have it. You got syphilis, that could be with you for the rest of your life. If you recovered, you're still going to get syphilis again. Does not mean it's immune, your immune memorization will be stay there. Number 4, there is no vaccination for that. So, you don't think about you get away shots, then you will have a good life, then you have another booster, then you can do whatever you like. That is not the case. There's no vaccination for that. So, sexually transmitted disease is more prevention and education compared to the treatments. Therefore, there's a big debate. It is a social issue versus medical issue. So here we're going to I'll tell you something. This will be the topic for your final exam extra point. Extra points are usually offer 30 points for that small essay writing, but you have to write in the classroom. We will talk in detail later on. Because undergraduates is usually a high-risk group for sexual transmitted disease, so you're going to have to do a little bit of search by yourself. Sexual transmitted disease, is that a social problem or is that a medical problem? It is a good debate question, and there is no white and black answer. Based on what you're reading, you write around 300 words essay. That was 30 extra points in the final exam. Okay? So we will talk about that later. So therefore, sexual transmitted disease, I usually talk briefly in the classroom, and then you can do this after classroom, search by yourself, and finish that extra points. But of course, since it is extra points, you don't have to do it if you already do very well for the others. Okay, that's where you make up the points. First of all, gonorrhea. Neisseria gonorrhea. Neisseria gonorrhea. Look at the horrible picture, what it looks like. This is a typical symptom for Neisseria gonorrhea. So, first of all, Neisseria gonorrhea, same as Neisseria meningitis, gram-negative, coccobacillus. Well, very tiny coccobacillus, and coffee bean shape. It's a morphology. Very important. This is a fastidious bacteria. Okay, what means fastidious bacteria? We mentioned clinically there is 3 microbiology agar. Here's Macamti agar, we did in the lab already. Blood agar, we tested already. And the one we didn't do is chocolate agar. If a fastidious bacteria, they will not grow on Macamti agar, not grow on blood agar, only grow on chocolate agar. It's a very special chocolate agar for Neisseria meningitis. It's called modified Sayre-Martin medium. Modified chocolate agar. And very important, this passage you can do a very quick test. It is oxidase test. Possibly. We will do this in the lab later on for oxidase test. And on the chocolate agar, it is a pushable colony on chocolate agar. So this is Neisseria gonorrhoea's typical characteristics. What will be the symptoms? We already see the horrible picture there. For male, will be abnormal discharge from urethral tract. Said very rudely, is pus coming from your penis. It's not a urine sample. Okay? So that's very simple. Female. What happened? Abnormal discharge from vagina tract, and you have abnormal bleeding without in the period of time, and you have abdominal pain. Abdominal pain. Now, what we want to emphasize here regarding microbiology standpoint is the analysis of the diagnosis is a little bit different. So what is the difference? For male, you will get a pus from penis. Okay, then what you do? You're going to have to do the gram stain. If you gram stain find it is gram-negative Coccobacillus coffee bean shaped, then we'll say bingo. That's Neisseria gonorrhoeae. Then what you do? You do isolation. Your isolation go to modified Sayre-Martin media, and then go to reference lab to confirm it. But for the female, how we do it? We do not do gram stain. Why? Because the discharge from the vagina tract, there's lots of other bacteria, especially lactobacillus, and some others. So it is how you do the gram stain. You will not find the bacterial colony or the cell at all. So we skip this process. We will directly streak plating onto chocolate agar. Or we say the modified multimedia. We will directly to observe colony morphology. And then we go from there. So that is how we do diagnose. It's a different. Another thing I also want to mention, gonorrhea, if the female has been contaminated, the pregnant woman has been contaminated, it's very easy to transfer to the newborn baby. And the newborn baby, the characteristics is the conjunctiveness of the eyebrows. So, you don't think this is a skin infection? No, it is a gonorrhea transfer from the mother to the newborn. Okay? That's something I will be talking relatively briefly here. This is what the symptoms, how we do. Well, once you have this disease, obviously you have to do antibiotics treatments immediately, because it's going to be very invasive. Going to be go to joints, hearts, routes, and everywhere. Okay. Diagnose gram stain. There's a new colony morphology testing, DNA probe test. Lots of things we can do. You see right here, this is antibiotics therapy. We'll talk about the antibiotics real quick. Penicillin resistant common. We will talk about the penicillin resistant at the end of the class. It's lots of topics we can use. You can read the last section of the slides, public education. So every single sexually transmitted disease in the microbiology textbooks, they will emphasize the public education is more important than those treatments. Okay, so that's for gonorrhea. Will be relatively simple. Next one we want to talk about all the time is the syphilis. So first of all, we wanted to review a little bit about what the syphilis talks about, what it is. First of all, syphilis, if you still remember, this belonging to a very special bacteria called spiral sheaths. It is not a normal bacteria. Spiral sheaths, if you remember, we talked about asexual filaments. It is very soft, so we cannot do a basic gram stain. Which one we use to do the observation? Dark field microscope. If you still remember the slides for our exam 1, you see background is dark and the vibral spiral shape of the treponemian palladium, which is underneath dark field microscope. Now, where they comes from? The spiral sheets usually come from cuts, bites, and abrasions. This is where they usually go inside. Okay? For syphilis, typically a pathogen is treponemia palladium. So that's the basic information for syphilis. Okay, now syphilis is very interesting. These picture now looks very good. Okay, what happened? This is the first stage. We'll just draw penis. Okay, like this. The first stage where you have about 2 to 7 weeks. Well, sometimes averagely 10 days. You have an ulcer there. Okay, then give you a very special French name called chancre. Let me make sure the spell is correct. I don't know French. Oh, we call it a shanky. That's the first stage. Okay. You have an ulcer there. Okay, then people go there to do the treatments. Put some ornament there. Couple of days later, it will be disappear or stay still there. More likely, we'll move on to a second stage. What will be the second stage looks like? I'm not very good at drawing, but I'll draw just a simple picture. What happened? In the second stage, it will be a whole body. You have these rash. This rash have another French name for it. Is called boomer. Okay. Whole body rash. The name called boomer. This took about 1 to 2 months for me. But what happens? Something very interesting. Once you have a boomer, this ulcer is gone. So you think you're recovered. Then you keep going to have activities at evening or night. Then it become a resource of contamination. That's really bad. And you think you have a skin disease. Because look at that, I have just rash on the body. And you see the penis area is recovering. That's very dramatic change. However, you don't know, you already go to the second stage, which is called a boomer. If the people doesn't really care too much about that, number 3 will become cardiovascular disease and neurological disease. This is the later stage. But I want to tell you one thing, the tricky thing is, this could be 10 to 30 years, or this could never be there. However, the people is contagious and carry on this syphilis. That becomes dangerous. That is another risk for sexually transmitted disease. Is some people will keep asymptomatic. This is really the risk. Because you didn't realize you have symptoms, but you keep doing the sexual activity and become a good infectious disease, contaminated resource. Okay, so this is something I want to mention for the syphilis. Syphilis is a very old and very typical sexually transmitted disease. Has been in the world about more than maybe 500 or 1,000 years. Originally started from, is actually in the Asian countries. It's illegal sexual activity, exchange or something, whatever you call it. Started from there. People later on isolated, become a syphilis. And at that moment, people want to conquer this disease. That started to see the development of antibiotics. Okay? You can look at the picture there. First one, second one right there, kind of like a Shankly. Third picture is like a boomer. Okay, that's a stages followed by that. Later on, you will have a nervous system, that's a neurological symptoms. And same as gonorrhea, it will be transmitted from pregnant woman to newborn baby, so it could cause congenital syphilis. Congenital syphilis. Okay, so so the newborn baby has syphilis, don't be feel surprised because it's from the pregnant woman. So that's the syphilis. You go ahead to see the syphilis, the same thing. Public education is more important. Antibiotic therapy is only in the early stage, and I will explain to you why later on. And we made the point before, antibiotics, most of them will be effective when the bacteria building their structure. Once it's already there, it's very hard to remove, and you will know why it is. Okay. Next one, we will be relatively briefly talk about is Lyme disease. So sexually transmitted disease, we basically talk about these two very briefly. And you could do a self-learning, and there's lots of others, basically all the same. So from the microbiology standpoint, we talk about these two briefly, and then we move to the others. The next one is called Lyme disease. Okay, Lyme disease, it is also the pathogen belonging to spirochetes. What is that? What's the name? Borrelia. It is could be Borrelia burgdorferi. Okay, genus name, species name. Burgdorferi is a microbiologist's name. He is a professor at the Montana State University. It's a small institution in Montana. Not many people heard about that. They had a very good microbiology department there by the time in 1970s. The Dr. Burgdorferi is the first person to find Lyme disease. Now, where it is initiated, it is in Lime County, Connecticut, back in 1970s. That's why it is called Lyme disease. What is the typical symptoms for Lyme disease? It looks like the picture there. The target, we call it a target-like annual rash. And the target rash. Well, later on, it will be transmitted to the cardiovascular disease, neurological symptoms later on. At the beginning, you will see the arm is target rash. By the time when you have that, it is a mild flu-like symptoms. Now, Lyme disease, where is it transferred? It's not really only by this pathogen. Why? Spiral sheets is very interesting. It is an obligate parasite, quotation mark parasite, which means they need a host. They need a host. They will not naturally exist just on like in the other media, They need a host. Now, what is a host for Lyme disease, for Borrelia burgdorferi? Look at here, the ticks. That's called Isodex ticks. This is a transmitted resource. The ticks will generate, first of all, is we call it a nymph. Then the nymph will find the rats, and the rats will going to have a fecal sample contaminated to the human being, and then the human being going to transfer to a deer. And then you do it again. Like this. So ideally, the best way you to do, you have to control the deer. But we cannot kill all the deer in the forest. Therefore, you have to cut this guy here. And you cannot control the rats in the forest. It's everywhere. No way to do it. Therefore, Isodex ticks is the way to control. Now, how we do it? If you are doing fishing, like deep fishing, marine fishing, deep ocean fishing, or those like aquatic activities, you have to do an annual inspection and whatever the physical exam to see the Borrelia burgdorferi, whether you have a Lyme disease. And the methods is actually very simple. You just use a PCR testing. Okay, using a PCR test, you use a ELISA Western blot, so special test kit, you could do it very easy. Same as syphilis, gonorrhea, antibiotic therapy in early stages. Later on, there is no way to do it. So what do we do? Prevention is more important than ticks control, avoid the ticks. But I tell you one thing, the key is for the deer. But you cannot kill the deer. So that's why the ticks control is important. Okay? This slide here, which is actually pretty nice, when you see what is the dominant area, Atlantic Ocean right there. Remember where are these? This is the Maine. Lots of the fish comes from the red lobster go there. What is here? Massachusetts area. What about here? Atlantic Ocean, Atlantic City, New Jersey, that area, go to Delaware, the Harbors Beach, or here, go Virginia Beach, go all these East Coast marine line is a high risk. That's what I said. Originally, actually, it's a resource coming from the marine ocean or those areas. And this is not we made it. This is coming from CDC website. That's what it looks like. And the other place, let's say West Virginia, pretty safe. See right here, Ohio, pretty safe. And West Coast, surprisingly, not much. Although it's go to the Pacific Ocean, but it's not as many as in the East Coast. Look at the East Coast, lot. Florida have a little bit. Okay, Florida Panhandle a little bit. So that tells you, if you go to the East Coast, you do the marine activities, aquatic activities, Borrello, Boca, is a risk for that. Okay, so very quickly, we finish about this section, and remember the extra points for the sexually transmitted disease. So we're going to move on to our exam 2 last slides. When we're going to talk about is antibiotics. So we want to talk about all these information one by one. First thing first, we want to just to talk about these slides. Okay, there is three terminologies about that. What is called chemotherapeutic agents? That is synthetic chemicals for the human being and the animal for treating disease. Antibiotics usually coming from microorganism, killing another microorganism. And antimicrobials is actually the both, the natural and the chemical. So this is slides which tells you some of the definition. But I will say this is kind of confusing you sometimes. It's not very easy to understand it. So we want to draw on the blackboard that we can explain to you much more in the detail what it looks like. And for this section, we will be focused more talk about the penicillin as an example for these antibiotics. So first of all, when you see the definition, kind of confusing, but we can explain to you antibiotics. First of all, what is that? Generally speaking, or we say naturally, this is metabolic chemical coming from a microorganism used to kill or inhibit another